Hi there, folks. It's Brad, and it is hot as F in Los Angeles. Let me tell you, don't come here. One of the most frequently asked questions I get is from people who are just starting to get into meditation or Zen or Eastern religions in general, and they've read a lot about concepts like annihilating the ego or dissolving the ego, and they're worried that they'll lose their identity and not be able to do whatever it is that they've been doing for however long they've been doing it. Often it's artistic people who think that they're going to lose their ability to produce art, or business people who are afraid they're not going to be able to do business anymore and this kind of thing because they're going to lose their identity. As I talk about this, look at me, look at my surroundings. Do I look like somebody who has lost his identity or annihilated his ego or any of that, or become something that can't communicate because he's just become a blank white slate or something like that, like a cloud or something, and can't do anything? No, I'm obviously not that. And the reason I asked this about how you see me is because the most helpful thing I found when I had these fears, which I did when I initially got into this, because I was making albums and I was being in a punk band and I was working on art and all kinds of things, and I didn't want to lose my sense of self. I looked at my teachers. I looked at Tim McCarthy and I looked at Gudo Nishijima later on, and I saw, well, these aren't people who have dissolved their egos or lost their identities. If anything, both Tim and Nishijima Roshi were very strong personalities, strong egos, if we want to use that term, and I knew exactly who they were, and they were very clear about that. It wasn't this kind of thing. And a lot of people make this mistake. People will make the mistake to the extent where they really try to lose their identity. And I've been to a lot of meditation centers and met people who seem to be working on this project where they don't want to say anything or don't want to have an opinion because they want to be completely, I have lost my identity and I've lost my ego and found peace at last. But I don't think this really works. It can't last for very long, and it ultimately just becomes another ego you're putting on. The ego of the egoless person is just another identity that you're taking on. So you might as well take on the identity that you had to begin with. I think the problem is in terminology. Everything you say is kind of a metaphor. It's kind of like that Star Trek The Next Generation episode Darmok, where they're all, it's an episode where they meet these aliens and they can't talk to them because they keep saying crazy weird things like Darmok and Jalaga at Tanagra and things that don't make any sense. And they go, well, does the translator work? Yes, the translator's working perfectly, but that's what they're saying. And it turns out they're talking in metaphors, and if you don't understand what the metaphors refer to, you can't understand what they're saying. I think that's an interesting episode because it's about how human speech works. You know, we work by trading metaphors with each other. Everything we say is a metaphor. So when somebody says dissolving the ego or annihilating the ego, they're trying to use a metaphor to describe a situation that is difficult to describe to another person who hasn't had that experience. The reason people fear this idea of dissolving the ego or losing the identity is because they think ego and identity is a thing that can be lost. Like it's a real something that exists somewhere. I don't know where it exists, here or there or where, but you imagine it to be a real something, and that your goal is to dissolve this something or annihilate this something or lose this something. But ego and identity are not real substances. What they are is a collection of related ideas and related concepts that kind of help you navigate the world. You have a name, you have a personal history and all of this, and opinions about things, and who knows what else all gets combined into that. And you call this by a collective name. You call it ego or identity or something. And what happens in a meditation practice, in a Zen meditation practice, is most of the time people go through it and they start to realize that this isn't a real thing. It's never been a real thing. There's no need to dissolve it or to annihilate it, but it's useful to understand it for what it is. It's useful to understand it as a kind of useful fiction that we produce and that we kind of do our lives according to this useful fiction. But if you start to examine what you actually are, you find that the more you try to find this ego, this me, this personality, the less you're able to find it. It's a collection of thoughts, I said, and a collection of impressions, a collection of habits as well. And when you see it for what it is, it's actually quite freeing, and it has no effect at all in terms of, well, for me anyway, how I behave artistically. I do pretty much the same amount of artistic stuff as I ever did before. I was never a business person, so that's not my inclination, but I'm sure you could do business as well. You might change your relationship to art or business, and the things that are important to you now might become less important, but this is just growth and change that happens with any person, and I think it's a good thing. So don't worry. You're not going to lose your ego. You're not going to lose yourself. You'll retain it, but you may find that it transforms for you. So that was a quick answer to a question that seems pretty deep. If this doesn't make any sense to you, leave me a comment below and maybe I'll do another video and explain it more. Also, remember, Patreon and PayPal links are below. That's how I make my living. Thank you very much for your continued support. We'll see you next time.